Okay, to start with, I take a piece of 14 gauge sterling and I scribe a 1/4 inch wide strip, 2.5 inches long. And my band here is going to be 8.5 inch. You can use a good ring chart to figure out your size and length you need. In this case, I'm going to cut a 2.5 inch long piece. And I'm going to cut it out with my jeweler's saw. And there's a lot of good ring charts online that you can find that will give you approximate length. I take a 80 grit sandpaper and I sand the edges of the strip straight. And then I'm going to take my orbital with a sanding disc and further polish it up, the sides of it and all. Just make sure it's all free of sand marks and things like that. These orbitals are real handy. Some people use Fordhams, Dremels. Okay, now I'm going to stamp 925 because this is sterling, and my maker's mark on the would be the inside of the piece. And then I cut a piece of square wire, 14 gauge, about 7 inches long. This is going to be the rope for the edges, to put along the edges. And I chuck it up in my vise and I hook a variable speed drill to it, and I just twist it slowly and get a good twist on it. Square wire makes a good rope without having to deal with two pieces of wire. And then I will anneal it, and then I put it on the side of my ring and cut it. I cut it just a little bit longer than the band so I can have some room to trim back to. And make sure it's all cleaned up and looks good. I'm just going to trim it off here. Then I'm going to flux the whole thing up with a Handy Flux. And I'm going to solder this rope on with 65% hard solder. Keeping the wire, or getting the wire straight and right up against the edges is a big plus. I use white out to paint the band with inside and out. This just keeps any solder flow off the band and out of my maker's mark. I have had it flow into my maker's mark when I really mess up, and then it's a pain. But this helps with that. Now I'm fluxing it up, like I said, with the Handy Flux, and fluxing the wire too, and just making sure they're going to be straight and fit up tight. And then I've shown some of these clips I make, but this is just a half of a big cotter pin, and I clamp them down up against the rope, and this keeps them right up tight against the band while I solder it. You want to make sure there's no gaps, and you want to make sure that when you take it up and you look at it, there's no fine holes between your rope and your band. Everything needs to be filled. I just cool it off, and there it is. Looks pretty good. Of course, it's all messed up with all the flux and everything, but then I clean it up with 400. Now, right before I was doing this here, I put it in an acid bath. I usually use muriatic acid, like a 25% solution, and I put it in there and it gets all the flux off of it, and then I'm sanding it with 400 and make sure I've got the white out off and everything's clean. And I look at the rope, and solder will go on your rope a lot of times. So I take a little blue silicone wheel and I go between the twist of the rope, and that cleans that solder out. And also, if you've got a bad spot in your rope, you can reshape that rope with that silicone wheel. Then I cut off the excess of the rope to match the ends of the band, and I tape the inside of the band. Now I'm going to use Pepetool's ring band bender. I'll put the model number and all of this in the description These are super handy. It comes with different size mandrels, and you just put it in there, and they have nylon inserts and metal inserts, and you just start to bend it. These are really handy when you're making a cathedral ring. But anyway, this will get it fairly round and bent without a lot of labor. And they just go in your vise. Now I'm going to hammer it on further together on a mandrel with a rubber hammer and get it pretty close that way. And then I put it back in here and close it on up. These benders come with different size mandrels. Okay, there it is. It's pretty close. And I've checked my size, and it's going to be just right on the money of what I need. I straighten the ends out, and I get them right up together, and then I saw right through them. That will straighten the joints out for soldering. When I solder it shut, then it will close up real nice. Otherwise, they'd be angled if you didn't do that. Now I've got it fluxed up again. I've got it in my lava rock, and then I'm just touching the solder to it when it gets up to temp, and that's when the flux turns clear. And I've got it, and I'm checking it on my mandrel on the size. Now, if it's a little bit small, which I try to make them a little bit small, I don't want them too big, then you just hammer it out on this mandrel, and it'll stretch it just a little bit to bring it down to the exact size you need. And you got to allow for your sanding and polishing and all that. So you want it maybe just a hair small, and then once you get through sanding it and everything and all the scratches out of it, it should be right on the money. I use a little buffer wheel to clean it all up. The silver polishes up really nice. And there you go. Got it all polished up and nice, and it's ready for the customer. Hey, like and subscribe to my channel. I'd really appreciate it.